All right, folks, we are back. Welcome on back. Of course, if you see my face here every weekday or every week rather at 11 o'clock Eastern time, that means you know it's Tuesday. So welcome on back for another fantastic edition of Traders Talk. My name is Josh Levitan. Great to see all of our students here at least. We got John, Lee, Ravina, Roger, and Grant joining us just before. Had John G just before as well. Ryan, Alex, Jeff, Patrick, and all of our students and trial members, most importantly, joining us for this week. Welcome on aboard if so. And with that, welcome on back for all of us on our social media streams at Cyber Trading U. So with that in mind, let me actually pop that up right now on our stream. If you're not subscribed, make sure to follow us. Be a friend, tell a friend at Cyber Trading U on all of our social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So with that, folks, there is a lot to talk about. As always, every week, we have student questions that we have to answer. But on top of that, we're in the middle of earnings season. So there is so much to talk about from last week. And then obviously here with what's on the screen, AMD, a little Halloween edition, might I say, of Traders Talk. But they are reporting after the bell here today, this October 31st. So we'll see what's ahead with their earnings report. Normally, I'm not a fan of trading companies pre-earnings. Normally, there's a lot more hesitation and there's just tighter ranges when you see a company about to report earnings. There could always be a leak that comes out. And hey, you know what? The reason I have AMD up here is for the reason where I'm getting to. Well, if there is a stock that is incredibly volatile, hey, Tesla from a couple weeks back, we traded them the whole week before their report came out. They are so volatile that they're always going to look to make a decent move for us to capitalize on. Same to be said with AMD, and you could say with like NVIDIA and the chip stocks in general. Hey, Intel last week just reported really good earnings. They had a great day trade, and that was one that I wasn't necessarily expecting to pan out as well. That's a stock that isn't normally as volatile. I guess that's more trading after the earnings report compared to here. This is pre-earnings, but more or less, these chip stocks in general are pretty volatile. And pre-earnings here with AMD, it was one I wanted to have my eye on. On top of that, we had Pinterest that just came out this morning with earnings. And then SoFi actually yesterday. There was a lot to talk about those trades too. So the biggest question that I got going into this week and even from this morning in Traders Talk, sent out a few emails to our students here. How do you trade them? How do you trade the earnings? What do you look for? Obviously you'd imagine with good earnings or if they beat the revenue expectations or even better, if they raise guidance that the stock could look to make a strong pop, right? Well, before we jump to AMD perhaps here, let's go right to SoFi. And yeah, SoFi is up 7.5% today. It's moving back on up. Wasn't really even expecting that clean of a move there. So let's jump back to yesterday at least. And this is when they reported their earnings. So the first thing that you could say perhaps, right, is, well, the market dropped off. Market dropped off early yesterday. It tanked. It's hard for stocks to swim upstream. Yes, that is 100% true. And, if the market really tanks, then of course it's furthermore to say. But SoFi ended up having a really good beat, if not mistaken. Let me actually just pull up Benzinga Pro. I'll show you the news feed that we have here at CTU, myself, Fausto, and Rich. So take a look at SoFi from yesterday. Their earnings beat, their sales beat. So it's a double beat across the board. Did they raise guidance? They did. They even raised the guidance across the remaining part of this year. It's not a whole lot left of 2023, but that's a good headline, right? Stock trended up pretty nicely in pre-market. It made for a good day trade here, actually. Easy to say with the trend, but we're not trading every stock coming off earnings, right? It's largely about liquidity and making sure the stock has big iceberg orders out there that could act as support resistance, and then just orders out there in general that could fill in this book. So SoFi definitely was that type of stock, or is that type of stock day to day. And coming off earnings, it definitely was that type of stock to try and capitalize early here in pre-market. But you want more. It wasn't up a whole lot percentage-wise, maybe 7, 8, 9%. So perhaps after the open, it could drop back, maybe build new support and make that proverbial slingshot up higher like myself and Fausto always teach. And well, hey, at the open, we got that. Ended up making for a great move at first on the 1-minute chart here. Let me ask us, though, for John, Lee, Ravina, Laureen, perhaps, that just chatted me on the side. Let me ask us here all together, what time do we start day trading, actively jumping into positions here at CTU? Is it at 9:30 or is it a little bit after? I had a great question from Laureen here, actually, in a moment. We'll get to that in just a second, Laureen. 9:35, right? First 5 minutes. So, hey, First couple minutes here, we see that proverbial slingshot. We're not jumping in right away even. Looks good, smells good, but now let's see resistance flip into support. Let's make sure that we can at least get otherwise a higher low. Maybe it doesn't even pull back here, and maybe it could build higher. Well, it looks like within the first 5 minutes, just about, like right at 9:35, popped, dropped, and then from there you say, okay, well, if it's not going to build from that resistance, let's see it try and hold this past resistance as support. So this could have been a decent opportunity if it was going to hold afterwards. It broke under and over. And if you decided to jump in right there, hey, clean entry perhaps, but this is where, again, I'm not even going to have you answer it for me here. If you're a regular attendee here in Traders Talk, certainly if you're on social media, I have a few catchphrases I say here week to week. When a stock breaks through a big level here, it's testing support. And if we want support to hold, if this is such a significant resistance it was holding under here in pre-market, then we not only need to see it hold above that price of support, we got to see it make a bounce, like a respectable bounce that we can make money off of, right? The whole morning here in the audio commentary, while a lot of us were with Fausto in the phase 3 stock class, the advanced trading course here at CTU, Fausto was conducting that earlier. And, a large part of my audio commentary to members like Lee or Bell or Brian, it's to say that laying over support does not make us money. Laying over support is good for a trade as long as I don't get stopped out, as long as it doesn't break lower, as long as I don't get stopped out. Like, not my cup of tea, but all right, I'll take it. What actually makes us money is the move back up after that big move. So even if you were to have jumped in right here, it's to say you're getting stopped out literally on the next candle. It's like, all right, well, clearly support broke again. It broke lower, and it's making that big move the other way, right? And if it's not making that big move on the way up, it's going to make a big move the opposite direction. Trust me, it's going to make that big move. Tell me that. Watch what happens next. So let me ask us here, looking at the daily chart, actually, it might not be as easy for me to ask this. So actually, rather, it might be just best for me to show and tell for right now. I'll do a similar question, at least on another chart coming up for like AMD and also just the IBRX trade. So notice here, this is back from like the late September here, like late last month, basically. So it bottomed out right around like 740-ish, 737 area and moved up. It spiked lower, moved back up again, but this looked like a nice rounded bottom, you could say. So certainly strong support at the point in time. Little doji. Hey, little doji there. Open and the close, same price. Now, on a weekly or monthly chart, that could be even more significant. It normally is a lot more significant from there. But you know what? This is a more recent doji on the daily chart. So you know what? Let's see on a pullback here. If it's not going to hold this as support, then that was my next line of support here. 740. I'd want a 745 as well to complement it. But really, this was what I was looking for as far as seeing the next area. The thing is, though, is on this trade, hey, SoFi has good earnings. They beat the rev. And not only that, they raised guidance after. So you would imagine, hey, it's not going to totally tank with the market. It's going to begin to build support and bounce, right? Right? And if you don't realize that, obviously, and if it's not going to make that proverbial big move that you're looking for, it's going to make a big move over time the other way, and it's going to continue. So just like I had asked our students before in the main chat board here of our live trading room, let me ask us a different question, but similar. What time do we normally expect reversals to happen within the stock market? Is it right there at 9:48, 9:49 in the morning? Is it a little bit after? What say you? John, Laureen, Sam, Lee saying all right around 10:15, 10:30. Absolutely. Sometimes even a little bit later, depending on how weak the market may be or how weak a stock may be otherwise. But, just to say yes, right around 10:15, 10:30. So when I was calling this out off support, I was even saying it like, I really like this level. And it was before it was even holding it here. So as it was coming down, I was saying, okay, well, it's on a steady downtrend. You don't want to catch a falling knife, obviously. But this is my next big level. And if they came off good earnings, and I am bullish on the market personally. Myself, I am bullish across the remainder of this year. I said that a month ago. And over time, obviously, the market kept breaking down a bit. So as long as you're able to mitigate the losses and cut them at least pretty tight, all right, you take a few licks. But obviously, otherwise, we've had a strong bounce yesterday and today so far. So, we'll see what's ahead long term with the market. But hey, if you expect a bounce in the market and you have SoFi here coming off good earnings, why not look for a bounce here? How could you not, right? Like 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? Well, again, laying over support doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't make us money. So for as good as it was looking here, it inched up 10 cents, 12 cents. It's like, all right, well, what's the SPY up to at that point in time? The stock market there in general, basically. And, that's where you could just see it's even beginning to top off even here at this point early on the uptrend, and it's beginning to pull back. So if the market's even beginning to top off at that point earlier than what we normally expect, go back to SoFi, and that's already been dropping. What do you think is going to happen by the time it ends up actually beginning to tail off? The market, that is. SoFi over time obviously ended up breaking lower, but every trade begins with the entry, right? Like, think about it. Literally, like, before you worry about setting your stop, every trade that you take begins with getting in. All right, well, every entry that you take is based off of a big level, charting mainly and volume mainly. So we'll go into bookmap in a moment, level 4. I want to do some historical charting stuff as we came off the phase 2 stock course last week. A couple little pop quizzes we'll do perhaps for those of us that were with me there. But ultimately, at least on this trade, every trade begins with the entry. So if you're not getting that big move, it's like, all right, like if we break lower, we just got to get out or take the break even trade. So over time, it ended up breaking lower. And after that, once it broke below 740, I figured like up until the afternoon, I was like, all right, that's it. Because otherwise, it's just going to exhaust out. It was already up like 8-9% pre-market. It tanked already back down. It's not the prettiest Christmas tree pattern, as we comedically like to say here, but it's an up and down move there, right? A sharp move up in pre-market, and then obviously an even sharper move afterwards on the way down. So point being, you don't want to buy a stock just because good earnings came out. I think that's pretty foolish. And actually, we went over this in the past. We went over this in class in phase 1 and 2 with news. We went over this in Traders Talk. Just look at Delta. Look at Delta once again from like, what was it, back here? This candle gapped up, tanked. And you heard me bitching about that even back from July. They beat their earnings. They raised their guidance here. They gapped up 4 or 5%. They tanked. I'm telling you. So you cannot just buy the news. Oh, good earnings. Okay. No, you got to make sure the stock has a clean break over a big level, just like we teach here in Traders Talk or our main curriculum. It's the same kind of catchphrase that I always say, right? So where you worry about earnings, you think it's some big special event. It's the same damn strategy that we're using every single occasion, folks. For instance, if there's a big gap up on a stock early in the morning, like Pinterest is, we'll jump to next. We'll get back to SoFi maybe because they were moving back up today. And that's not necessarily because of their earnings, actually. Something else came out overnight with them, if I'm not mistaken. So perhaps if we have enough time, I will jump back to SoFi. And that did make a decent bounce today, but a little extra on top of there. Well, hey, overnight with Pinterest, we ended up seeing them pop, right? So technically, yes, it popped, a real after hours move. But if you're not looking at the after hours charting or the pre-market charting, you're focused on the regular session, you can deem this to be a potential gap, right? So again, I mean, hey, if they had good earnings or raised guidance, whatever the case may be, you can't just throw a dart on the wall and hope it lands. It can't just buy. You have to work off the levels that the stock presents. So that's where I say, let's kind of go into the charting here from the after hours. And then also we'll drag bookmap into this, of course, our heat map program, and we'll see where the big orders really were. So, hey, in hindsight, between you and me, we know that this drops as low as 28 and bounces. So, as far as like focusing in on like, oh, where could we find the big level? Let's look back on this chart. Let's go into bookmap. Well, right away, we go through the same motions here in Traders Talk. I'm not even going to ask the question because I assume every one of us, especially coming off our classes this and last week, know this right away. They have it in the back of their head. Whole number levels, and especially for something as we're getting a little more expensive, we're out of the $5, $10, price range here, $25, $30. You're not doing 50-cent levels like this. You're really just going whole numbers. So 27, 28, hint, hint, 29, 30. So that is like easy to kind of say before anything. But let's actually dig into this chart and see, hey, was there a clean level around that 28? Was there a top in the after hours around there? And, it wasn't pinpointed at $28, but your first major top here, and this is using a 5-minute chart still, but, popped up and up and up and then topped off there and dragged back down a bit. And then over time, it broke over it and closed over it and held over it as support. So this actually seems to be a nice little chart level. We'll go with that. Nice little chart level on Pinterest here. Then afterwards, I mean, otherwise, just here in the after hours at the end, it looks like it was having a tough time pretty nicely. 28.75 roughly, 28.76, just topping off there going into the end of the evening. And then here heading into the pre-market early, let's see what we have. Let me ask us here, actually, what's the trend of Pinterest from 7 a.m. leading into the market open? It's up percentage-wise, but for all of us here, Joyce, Lee, Sam, all of us here, what's the trend of this stock looking at the chart from like 7 o'clock in the morning? What do we got? Up, down, left, right? What do we think? Steve, Sam, Laureen, John, Roger, all of us here saying down. Absolutely. So, hey, I'll ask this one once more for you folks. What do we see when a stock is trending down? Are we seeing more aggressive buying or are we seeing more aggressive selling pressure at the time? Again, it's up percentage-wise. We know that. Coming off good news. We know that. But it's trending down, and when a stock is trending down, we're seeing more selling pressure, right? So I'm not like super giddy to just jump into this trade right away. It is trending down leading into the open. So perhaps we might see more selling pressure after, right? You always got to ask what if, and not what if just like on any literal instance, but let's work off trend. Let's work off of, hey, based off that trend, are we seeing buying or selling pressure? And then from there, we ask what if. So I'm not as giddy to jump in right away, but hey, if there is any big level that we could work off of here, perhaps this could be a nice, break over this price once the market does open, maybe under and over. Obviously, we have our like 28.20 price, which we plotted right there. Now, let's dig into Bookmap because obviously I know that's what everyone's here kind of waiting on here. So let's take a quick look at the heat map program that we have from yesterday even. We'll go into the after hours yesterday. Notice this. We do have an iceberg specific to the price 28.50. This was like even from all day yesterday out there. It was like really your largest order entirely, really, 28.50. Interesting. It was out there all day pretty much. Yes, it got pulled in the afternoon before the pop, but that could still have some significance. So I'm not going to plot that line for us right away. I just find that interesting. Little food for thought. We do have a support line here. And hey, again, between you and myself, this price I don't think gets touched by the time the market opens. So in hindsight, we could easily agree that Pins doesn't drop down this low. But you know what? 22,000 shares. It was out there for like an hour and a half, 2 hours before the after hours last night. I focus on the longevity of how long these orange lines are out there for. So that's definitely something you should plot. Again, in hindsight, it wasn't relevant to today's trading, but let me ask us here really quick. How about this then? Hey, it's easy to say in hindsight that 27.66 never got touched today. It was never the low of the day today. It bounced from a higher price. Look at the column CVP. Look at the middle column. Actually, for those of us that don't have the main version of this, if you're on Think or Swim, I'll do you one better because even if you're on Think or Swim, you should be seeing what I'm seeing here, right, on your own platform. So I want you to answer for me. What price do we see big volume getting filled on that column CVP? Go up to down right there on that column CVP. What price sticks out to you? Doing my water breaks sparingly there. 28, right? Ravina, Sam, Joyce, Laureen, all saying 28. Listen, you go from top to bottom, right? Just see like, well, this one sticks out a lot more compared to these here, right? Every one of us should have answered 28 instantly. If it tanks below 28, and if it tanks below this, then maybe this could stick out at 27, but that's way too irrelevant of a price level here when this is trading at $1.71 higher per share. So if I'm looking for support, this is support to me. This is also support to me. Why? Because it looks like for as much volume that got filled there, Pins broke over it in the after hours. Hey, folks, real quick question. When a stock breaks over resistance and it moves off of it, we'd like to think that resistance should initially become What? And you see it there. It's easy to say in hindsight, looking at this already painted picture. But hey, if you're a student here at CTU, not on social media, hey, I appreciate your attendance and participation each and every week. But if you are a member inside our live trading room, you see my ugly mug right now for this week's edition. You got Sam, Lee, Brian, John, Laureen, Alex, and we got a couple of Alexes here joining us, Roger, and all of us here otherwise. We go through the same motions here every singular Tuesday morning at 11 o'clock Eastern time. So this isn't new information. This isn't a revelation, right? The more that you're here with us, the more that you could sit here and say, that's right. You know, that's what he said last time, right? And you remember that here, right? But that doesn't pay the bills. What pays the bills is for you to remember that not here. It's for you to remember it on your own. When you're trading, as we're making call outs, obviously, as we're with you and doing these audio broadcasts, but this is a workshop. This is not live trading. The pressure ain't on right now. We're looking at this already after it happened. And yes, we do this every week, so you should absolutely have a very profound understanding of this the more and more that you're with us. But again, that's not the end game. The end game is for you to supplement your income or to fully replace your income as you're maybe retiring or looking to switch jobs and you're looking to become a full-time trader. Hey, it's doable. You just got to have a process and you got to be very disciplined with that process. And hey, that's easy for me to say from this side of the field, looking at this already painted picture, right? I did not take this trade, but where I come from in that regard is, hey, I traded the SPY mainly today. I did option calls, and I took 2 losses at first before the big pop and win. If you have a good understanding of strategy and levels, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? Even SoFi, as we possibly go back to that in a little bit later in the day yesterday, I was able to nip a 20-cent profit. Nothing to write home about, but if you know your levels and know where the next big, all right, there's a chance, there's an opportunity. So here, when the market opened up this morning, man, popped and dropped at first. It smashed below this first chart support. So again, if you're looking to anticipate a bounce within the first 2 minutes, this ends up happening at 9:30, like 2, this happens, breaks below. You're not trading right away there. You're trading at 9:35 or just within the few minutes after that, right there. So it really begins to happen here. It breaks under and over on the first or on the second chart support line right there, the 2820-ish. But when we look to follow, or I should say, when at CTU, our main philosophy is to follow the big money, right? So what am I more interested in? Am I interested in like a smaller chart level? Even if it was holding to a degree here and there, am I interested in a smaller chart level, or am I interested in a larger volume level? Regardless of chart versus volume, notice the adjectives I'm using. So right there, obviously I'm skewing you to answer in a certain manner there, but you want to focus on where the big money is trading at, because hey, if this is as bullish as it could be, then that should hold, point blank. If SoFi was as bullish as it could have been yesterday, then it should have held 740. Simple as that, right? It wasn't. It broke. That was it. Well, Pinterest, if this is as bullish as it's supposed to be, coming off good earnings, then this needs to hold 28. And obviously it did. Got the slingshot, as we call it. And, a nice story there. Moved on up towards, obviously, a high of like near 30. Got so close. Got really close. Just mere pennies away from that whole number resistance. And not even whole number. That's like decade number resistance. 10, 20, 30. You got an 80,000 share seller there right now. I thought they were even bigger at one point. Maybe. No, maybe they're stacking up even more right now. Maybe I'm going colorblind. But it looked a little darker red right here at the time. But yeah, like 80,000 shares still on the offer currently, live right now at 30. So it goes to show this was out there since the opening bell. Clearly, that's resistance. The more and more and more and more it goes up, you got to expect for it to begin to pull back. You got to begin to expect for it to maybe reverse. Here we are, 10:30 Eastern time. Hint, hint. But otherwise, though, you're going to look to sell into demand. You don't want to sell at this level. We teach this is one of our main rules. You want to enter over a big level. You want to sell under a big level. So, hey, did it get up to 29.99 even? No, it got to like 29.96, 4 pennies off. and then it dropped. So that's where greed can cost you. If you're in this trade from 28, but then even otherwise, let's say you take the quick pop from here and you're seeing it shoot up. You're like, ooh, good earnings. Okay, maybe this could really go. If you jump in from here, it's like a hell of a profit. You don't need to get greedy and try and bite off more than you could chew, right? I say this now quite often, probably be one of my mainstays with my catchphrases I have, but we're not trying to be perfectionists. We're not trying to bite off more than we could chew. We're just trying to take enough meat off the bone to at least keep us full, to satisfy us at the end of the meal. So with that, if you're not normally up 50 cents a share on a position, even if you're trading small lot, that's a big profit on 1,000 shares. So the more of those that you take, then hey, you should feel more confident to say what works on 100 shares will work on 500 shares and then work on 1,000 shares over time. So you might think it's a lot of money to risk on a position, 1,000 shares on a $28 stock. It is. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot of money. And I say that regardless if you have a few $100,000 in your account, that's still a lot for a one-day trade. But that's not an extreme amount, though. That I see, I don't necessarily do 1,000 shares on a $25 to $30 stock. Sometimes I will. If it's like an A+ setup and I'm very in the moment and I'm there to take it, then yeah, if it's primetime trading. But otherwise, on 500 shares, that's still a decent profit. I don't need to trade that many shares to feel happy about a profit on this type of stock. So that's where I say just over time, what you trade, I'm not as concerned. Well, let's retract that. I'm always concerned about what you trade, especially as a new student. You should not be trading large size. You should be trading 100 shares basically at most. But it's more about how many cents per share you're making on a consistent level. If you're a deer in the headlights and you're only making 5 cents a share on most trades, hey, it's easy for me to say try and hold on longer at times, but I know in your shoes it's not as easy, right? So that's where you and I would need to work together on coaching calls, or hey, in Traders Talk, right? Send over a quick question, josh@ctutrading.com, and we'll have a chance to cover it in these workshops. But hey, if you don't ask, then we can't help you, right? We can't have you focus in on the right part of the trade. We can't have you, put the trade under a different microscope or different perspective from what you're using. When I review trades, oftentimes I'll hear from traders what they messed up on, and they're oftentimes, right to a certain degree. But from my lens, it might be a completely different part of the trade that they should be focused on first, that will allow them to at least set a stop or to allow them to go with momentum more. So that's where here on, in this case, you don't want to get too greedy. For as much as this pumps up and up and up and up and up and up and up, reversal times around that 10:15, 10:30. It's possible this can keep pushing up later today, but normally, much more often than not, there's a high probability. Notice all of these things that I'm saying, they're very similar to one another. There is a high probability of this happening, of this flattening out, of this making lower highs and then a lower low maybe, but so far support's still holding here. So that's good for a trade later on. Now, this was Pinterest really quickly as far as earnings. Let me know if you have any questions on that. SoFi we covered briefly here too. I do want to talk about the AMD trade here quickly because their earnings are after the bell today. Hey, first off, there's a lot happening in the world, right? Let alone the old stock market here. So not everyone is bullish. I get that. And to each their own on that, right? But if you do believe that there is going to be a bounce in the market heading into the end of this year, then you should be focused on trying to buy some dips or trying to buy some strong breakout opportunities, especially on these like larger cap stocks. So let's say companies like AMD, Tesla, obviously NVIDIA. I know something came out overnight with them, some headline about them losing like $5 billion. So, on a more general basis, and NVIDIA out there. But otherwise, with AMD, if their earnings are coming out later today, then this could provide a very good opportunity for you to catch a bounce. Or if you're bullish on the market, let alone the company, then it gives you a great opportunity, not just as a day trade, but as a swing trader long term. Personally, and I'm just speaking for myself here, right? Because again, as much as I say everyone is different with their view of the market, of course, everyone is different with their own swings or investments. I have no long-term position in AMD. I have day trade calls right now, but it's to say that long-term, I don't have my position loaded yet long-term or for the next few months, let's say. I want to, though. And I'm a big fan of their company, their product. I've been a big fan since 2015. I could tell you my worst decision ever was not jumping back in on a swing trade. I effed up back in 2015. I was up like a few grand, and then I blew majority of the profit on inline earnings, not even bad earnings. This is back in 2015. So actually, let me even show you that, because it goes to say I'm not perfect. No one is. And look what happened to AMD since 2015. And when basically their now CEO, Lisa Su, took over, she whipped this company in shape. That's for sure. Big fan of her. And that's, more to come on that. But AMD over time, back when this was like an $11, $12 stock, this was when I was jumping in on it. And it ran up parabolically, obviously, afterwards. But the research I did on it back in 15, 16 then, the people I was following at least were correct ultimately, but they were even saying like in 5-6 years with AI and deep learning, this could be a $70, $80 stock. And it blew the roof way over that over time. That is, we had inflation obviously, but with AMD, I do like the company. Their CEO has a great vision. She loves dunking on the haters and all the people that doubt her. So the conference call later today should be pretty interesting. She is super smart, Lisa Su. So with that, let's take a look at AMD, because was there a good trade on AMD? Well, I could go back on the regular chart here, but since I have Bookmap actually still up right now, notice something here. This is pretty interesting. Notice this. Check this out. So you have your iceberg here at 95. I think that we could all see that there. This orange line here, but that's support from yesterday, this is. We have resistance basically at 97 throughout the day. I think that we could all see that there, orange line. Every other orange line I'm not really focused on, irrelevant. Look at this. Look at the open and close prices, the big dots. We talk about this in our classes. But, 96.16, the open, this is the open price for the entire week candle, by the way, not just the day. But the close price, for a $96 stock, for it to be 2 pennies off from the open, hey, we went over this in class even just, last week with basic charting, and I went more into dojis even a bit there. I know some purists out there would say it's not a doji. Listen, it's a $96 stock, and it's 2 pennies off from the high and the low, from the open and the close. I mean, so that to me is a pretty damn close doji candle. Basically, they're kind of insinuating for this to be a candle here too. 110.62, 110.61, just back from late July. Well, this is as close as we get as well. It's basically 2 pennies off from each other there, the open and the close. Actually, ooh, that's interesting. The daily chart, the open price is different. Well, this is what I'm focused around. This will take precedence here then. So this big dot, this 251,000 share block print, 96.16, that to me is what I'm more focused around. So that to me kind of insinuates that this is a pretty close to a doji as we can get. So that created a pretty big level for today for me, this AMD trade. So before we even dig further, right there, I think that you see what I see here today. And this was all from after the market opened up. It dropped off from that price at 930. Hell, the open price today could have been right there, but it dropped down. It ended up moving back up. Support became resistance. And then from there, over time, it did break out. It broke above resistance. I want you to answer for this for me, folks, if you can. I asked it before you answered it. So, I appreciate you, dealing with me and my catchphrases each and every week. But one more time, when a stock breaks over major resistance and it runs off of it, we would like to think resistance should become what? Resistance should become what, folks? What do we got? Support. And yes, you should take this trade right here when it blasts over this level. Absolutely. Your best entries to buy a stock are directly after it breaks through a big level on the way up. This is as clean as it gets. But if you miss it, and if you're looking for a pullback, you're looking for some. Well, it looks like it just even tried to touch it right there. It did not make my famed under and over. So it even goes to show it's even stronger than that. There's no need for that. It looks like it just kind of kissed right above it and popped back up. Now, there could be more to that, but, goes to show, though, that since these two were like just pennies from each other, $96 stock, just 2 pennies away. Come on. So that right there is, and you just see it on the CVP. Like, yeah, just look at this thing. So this is massive, right? Now, again, 95 is potential support. That's a good level to watch. So obviously they're showing in pre-market a bit. When the market opened up, look at that. There you go. Same price, 96.18. It was the same exact price. The open today is even the open yesterday and the close yesterday. So definitely big volume traded at this price, right? Pre-earnings. So you'd figure if it blasts over that level and makes a big move off of it, or at least, can break over it for that matter, we should get some pretty big moves and perhaps a clue for what's ahead maybe with their earnings coming out later on today. But nevertheless, this ends up coming down towards 95 early this morning. So what's interesting here is that this does go under and over, right, within the first 5 minutes. I shoot straight, folks, right? You know that. I don't BS you here. And it's to say this right here is a perfect fit for what I look for in an entry. Yes, in an entry. Look, it crapped the bed after, right? Well, it's to say at least once you jump in this trade, it broke under and over. Well, we know that we're looking for a big move afterwards, but and might I say, and on top of that, I should say that every trade begins with the entry. So this here is the entry at first if you're looking for an initial bounce. Now, afterwards, you do see like maybe a minute after a big iceberg shows up here. So that's not good, but that shows up afterwards. That doesn't show up here. So right where my cursor is, if you took that entry and you came to me on a coaching call, I'd say that's a grade A entry once it breaks under and then right back through that big level on the way back up. But what are we doing after we get in that trade, folks? Once we jump in that trade, what are we doing? When we start our car in the morning and we're in the driveway, we're about to pull out, what are we doing before we pull out? Before we shift into reverse. Brian says, and Sam and Larry and Ravina now saying, right, we got to put this seatbelt on, right? We got to set our stop. We got to make sure that our risk is set up already. So that's where instantly, as soon as I jump in, I am setting up my stop. Now, that's where I can tell you pretty easily. Well, yeah, if someone were to take this trade right here, then you're getting stopped out very quickly, right? Does that mean it's a bad trade? No. It means that you were wrong with that decision. We're wrong with what you thought the stock would do. But if you have a very tight entry to a big volume level and you're basing it off kind of what we're going through here, under and over for support like this, just like it did with Pinterest, by the way, at 28. But the difference is here, obviously, the bears were still in control. So if we're not getting that big move, that proverbial big move shortly after on the way up, getting a big move on the way down. And then once this pops up after, that's not good. So, that's where I say you got to make sure you get out before this even pops up. You don't know if this will pop up, but there's no point in holding on any longer because look what happens. It drops off more afterwards, right? Now, this does not drop to 94 on the gun here. It does not go under and over 94 at the next whole number level. If it were to have done that, that could have been a great, bounce entry there. Let me ask this really quick. Once again, when a stock breaks below big support and drops from it, support should become what? Resistance. Okay, are we jumping in right away here? I wouldn't. I mean, it's easy to say, but it broke under this as support. So just even without this iceberg showing, I would still say support becomes resistance. But you still have this big iceberg afterwards, and it looks like for about 3 or 4 minutes. It looks like a lot of time here. It's only 3 or 4 minutes, actually. But it is chipping around it for a little while. So, yeah, this is like kind of chewing on aluminum foil for a little while here because it's not breaking higher. It's holding over support. It's trying to. It's looking all right, actually, here after 10 o'clock. Higher lows finally developing better. But laying over support doesn't make us money. You got to get that higher high. You got to get that larger reaction up. So if you had jumped in around this area and you're looking for that proverbial big move, you get it later on, right? You get it here and you should be happy. I wouldn't necessarily be like doing back. If you're asking like, how would I react to this? I wouldn't really be doing backflips over that. I wouldn't really be having the best time out there, but I'd be saying, all right, as long as we hold higher lows, as long as we continue to see support hold, then there's a chance, right? So obviously we all saw what happened just a moment ago. This ended up moving on up pretty nicely. And just before it looks like it topped off, I guess a smaller little iceberg may have shown here. We'll take a look at the market in just a moment, but otherwise, look at where AMD is at now. Wow. So we are back down to this same very price once again. And now this might be where we get a little under and over. Let's see how strong this price really is over time. Technically, it's like a combination of like 96.16, 96.18. So basically leave it right there. Now, obviously, they have their earnings report after the close today, as I said. So, whatever reaction we see here, we'll see a much larger reaction based off what EPS they come out with compared to the estimates, the rev, and if they end up raising guidance or not, either way, we'll see if that happens. But let me know if you have any questions on AMD. We'll come back to this in just a little bit, actually. I do want to go through some email questions in just a little bit. I had a question that came in earlier from one of our members, Laureen, here. So I do want to get to that before I forget. So Laureen was asking simply, this was just a quick question about one of the stocks on our pre-market watch list, not the main morning one at 9 o'clock. Obviously going into the market open, Fausto's on at 9 a.m. Eastern time, on YouTube, Facebook Live, Twitter, obviously for all of us here in Cyber Group. That watch list that he posts is the one that you want to focus, around. But at 8 o'clock in the morning, 7:45 Eastern, I am putting out the pre-market watch list where we're going to be able to at least follow some trades that came off of news earlier or that might look to make a pop on their own accord coming up. So this morning, I'll tell you the truth, this morning was like terrible pre-market. There wasn't anything looking good out there whatsoever. I think one of our students, Mark, wrote earlier, and I caught it early in the chat. He's like, it's like penny stock land out there. Yeah, I mean, we got AMD dipping a little bit here. I wouldn't call that a clean break of support just yet, by the way, folks. Let's just see what happens in the next minute or few. It's on a downtrend off the high. So if it continues, that's where I'll call it a cleaner break. Let's just see this play out here, under and over. But, otherwise, though, just for a lot of the stocks that we had on the pre-market watch list, for a lot of stocks that were out there in pre-market, nothing was looking good. There was nothing that was like of note to me. Pinterest off earnings, obviously, but this didn't have great liquidity in pre-market, didn't have like a really tight spread like you see now. Normally the stock has good liquidity though after the open. So this is what we did expect in terms of the order book out there at least. But otherwise though, that wasn't the case in pre-market. So when you look at, let's say like in the morning after 8 o'clock, obviously I'll go to the ones that were actually on the watch list there. I know SPRC had a huge pop after 8 a.m., right? Didn't this pop like literally at 8 o'clock on the nose? A little bit after, pardon me. But yeah, at 7:45, 7:50 in the morning, there was no activity on this. So I'll tell you, if this was popping at 7:45, 8 in the morning, this would have been number one on the list. We called that out as soon as it broke out. Let's go to that VSME because that's the one that Laureen was mainly asking about. Like, why was that on the list? Well, it was up big in pre-market. It was up at least however much percent, like 8 or 10, 12%, maybe even a lot more. But it was trending up here. Yes, it is below $1. So if you want to nickname it a penny stock, you can. I will be a perfectionist here where I say it's not a penny stock. You could actually see it's listed right on the NASDAQ exchange. Again, though, we normally don't follow stocks below $1. So that's where we nickname it that. Thing was moving up well, though, in pre-market. Early, like before we open up the trading room, it made a good move up at first. And then after 7:30, it tried one more time here, right? At like 7:42, it was popping. So when I put out the watch list at 7:53, I was hoping for a higher high. I was hoping for, a higher low to continue to build here, but then the higher high afterwards. So, not all the stocks that make it to our watch lists, pre-market, morning, afternoon, either way, as much as we want you to focus on those at first, please, there's a whole reason we scan, right? Not all those are going to work out over time. And if this ends up just crapping the bed right away at 8 o'clock and just doesn't break higher, these spikes here, you do have to just say, like, kind of disregard, honestly. I know they look kind of wicked. They look pretty actually crazy. These are attributed by late prints that come in from earlier in the morning. So basically, it was looking good going into the 8 o'clock move. We were looking for the higher high, and then just you could tell outside of these crazy wicks, this was not breaking higher. It was moving lower, and then it was making a lower high, and then so you knew early with this one, this was not going to produce what we wanted it to produce going into the 8 a.m. move. But again, hey, we got Fed meeting day this week, tomorrow and Thursday. So, look at this OMGA. Like, this thing didn't look great going into 8 o'clock, but this was on our pre-market list because this was honestly, compared to the other stocks moving at that point in time, not the worst. So, it had at least a decent order book. I said, okay, it's not on a crazy big spread. At least there's some orders out there. Put it on our list. On a day like today, it's very tough to, for lack of better phrasing, we'll say, it's tough to turn water into wine, right? So, that's where if there's nothing really moving too well after 8 o'clock, you just got to keep waiting. Then you'll start scanning after 8 o'clock or 8:15. If there's nothing from that pre-market list looking good, then you start scanning, seeing what else is out there. Obviously, we scanned right away and we saw the SPRC pop. So, we diverted our attention right over to that one. All right. So with that, actually, let me jump back because I do want to go over one thing because we mentioned briefly just before, hey, SoFi had good earnings, but then they tanked yesterday. They're actually moving back up today. News that came out on SoFi overnight. Let's go into that briefly. They ended up coming out some deal, I believe, with BlackRock. I'm not perfect on the headline here, so if anyone has it, actually let me know. Send it in the chat if you can. But I think it was like a $350 million contract partnership deal with BlackRock. That alone sounds pretty good to me. So, take that for what it is. And had a nice move after the open, at least SoFi. So, after the move they had yesterday, I would not really be too focused on them today. But that news did change the dynamic of at least what the market thought of SoFi, and they had another run back up. So hopefully this could make the better move later on this afternoon and continue to go. Would love to see it. But that's where I could jump back here and segue to where I was going to go to. And obviously this dropped off right away, right? Well, we take a look at a trade from earlier today, SPRC, very similar, right? We said pre-market it popped early. This stock was up like 130% early in the morning within 15 minutes. Well, I will tell you, with everything that we've been seeing over the last month with TPST, ICU, INVO, don't ask how I remember all this stuff. I have no life. It's to tell you at least that with all these stocks up 300, 500, 1,000%, why can't this move up more? That would be a good thought, right? I mean, I think that's a natural thought. If it's continuing to make higher lows, if it's going to bounce here, then you're saying there's a chance. Well, obviously, it didn't bounce for long and it pulled back. So let me ask us, we know it's up percentage-wise, but what is the trend of this stock looking at this picture from left to right? There we go, Bill, with the headline there on SoFi just before. It says, SoFi and BlackRock partner on a $375 million personal loan securitization. There we go. That's what it is. I was like 95% right there, right? Sam, Larry, Michael, there we go. Down. Come on, it's all down right there. It's easy. When a stock is dropping, what are we seeing more, folks? Are we seeing more buying pressure? Are we seeing more selling pressure? Ooh. Selling pressure. Come on. All right, same question as before. Now, that's where, hey, if this drops at the open and it could build support, maybe it can make a slingshot like Pinterest did, right? Let's actually go into that for right now. We'll go into SPRC and the heat map here coming up. I'll tell you what, I got some maintenance guys around my apartment complex. I'm in my home office now. Newly lit home office, by the way. I feel like it's definitely a bit brighter. I actually have some more lights coming in at the end of this week, so I'm not fully done just yet, but it looks like I'm out of a cave. And with that, I got some maintenance guys coming around because they're installing some new appliances in my apartment. So I'm looking forward to that. But got a hard out at 12 o'clock, so I got to make sure I'm good there. Let's take a look back at least on the heat map. We were just looking where the SPRC, right? I might need to, yeah, okay, it's still up here. All right, there we go. I thought I had to reload it. So when we look at this pot, there isn't really like a big volume price level here. There's just a bunch of volume that's filled near the top, not at one specific price. It's very top heavy in general. So if there was a much larger volume spike here, let's say on the regular old CVP graph right here, like if this stuck out really big, really large here, I could use that maybe. But that's not the case. So what happened after the market opened up for SPRC? Well, it barely moved up and then it just tanked right back down again. Lower highs, lower lows. So the selling pressure continued. Now, if you take one look at the daily chart, perhaps you could say history often could repeat itself here because this thing, A, is a mess. But look at literally every single time it gapped up in the pre-market, it had a big red candle to it. It had a big, body even afterwards to where it closed much lower from the open. So, clearly that's what we're getting once again today. It's like the fourth time in the last month and a half. That's a pretty crazy stat right there. But, hey, SPRC, this isn't the first time that we've seen this happen, right? News came out, stock dropped afterwards. Well, you saw that happen on SoFi from yesterday, but obviously you should expect that more for a stock that is up a lot more. So if it's not going to make that breakout higher, then you better believe that it's more exhausted. There is a chance for it to pop, but if we're not getting that chance, then don't hold your breath waiting for it. You might be holding your breath for a long time. So that's where I say, look back to last week's Traders Talk. Look back 1 week ago. Literally, look back at this. EBVC, right? Let me see if I can go back on the chart here. Get a nice bounce on the market here coming up. No, let's get a nice pop. I know we got Fed Day tomorrow and Thursday, so probably not expecting anything big, but let's get a nice bounce up higher on the SPY by the end of this Traders Talk here in 3 minutes. So basically, ABVC, popped up, huge runner at first, ended up eventually tailing off and off and off and off. And if I were to ask you what the trend of this stock is leading into the open from 8:30 to 9:30, it's tough to confidently say up. Like, yes, clearly it popped, but then afterwards it stopped making higher highs. It's flattening out after the peak. Looks like a rounded top actually there. And if we don't break higher, then we are going to break lower. So, hey, we saw this happen here. We saw this happen on INVO, right? Take a look at this one back from last week. I think this one we actually covered in Traders Talk last week, not the EBVC. That was from last week too, of course, but same pattern where this one ended up making a big move in pre-market. But hey, let me ask you here. What's the trend of this stock leading into the market open, folks? Let me ask you that. I'm going to wrap up here in 2 minutes. Like I said, I have a hard out at 12 o'clock. We got our maintenance guys running amok here in my apartment complex. I'm going to knock on my door probably 12 p.m. sharp. They're quite disgruntled when I had to tell them 12 o'clock. So what's the trend? Up. And contrary to down, what type of pressure are we seeing for a stock that's trending up? Are we seeing selling pressure? Or are we seeing buying pressure? What do we got? Buying. Okay, so that's where you could ask, well, hey, what if history repeats itself? Yeah, it's up a lot percentage-wise. It could tank, but the thing is looking good heading into the open. Doesn't mean to buy it right away, but it means that you should be asking, well, what happens if this can break over a big level? What happens if this can break resistance and run? Well, hey, resistance could perhaps become support over time, and it shook down to build a higher low. It kept going up more after. This obviously was a much more volatile stock in nature with all of the halts that it had. But again, though, there's a fine difference with how I'm planning these trades on the small cap stocks. It translates with news and what you should expect to see out of a stock in general, like with SoFi. But even furthermore, on all these cheap small cap stocks, SPRC, ABVC, INVO, the ICU trade that we had last week as well. There's so many. Hell, I mean, IBRX even as well. And this was one that is a lot healthier of a stock. Definitely a huge pump the last week straight. And this has great volume on the book, but this is going to dump right back down too over time. So that's where if you're not setting your stop, if you're not entering a trade the right way, you will get caught slipping, right? And especially for something that is up as much as, these stocks have been from the ones that we've covered. And even the more this goes up, you have seen what happens here dating back to earlier this calendar year, right? Look at this squeeze. So this is not a swing trade. This is definitely a good day trade, and back to back to back to back days. Like, okay, we'll take it. That doesn't happen too often, but we'll take it. And it has a great book for us to trade it off of, and that's awesome. But look what happened here. So you can't tell me that this is like a really good swing trade before it started popping. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's a good swing trade now. And like if you jumped in and held some shares, you're looking good, but eventually big trees fall hard, right? It doesn't matter if it's on the intraday scale where it's up 150% in one day, or like this where, hey, now this is up like certainly over 100% in the last week or two. Eventually this is going to have a down day. It's going to come back down hard. I said that earlier, and still pushing up. So, hey, I could easily be wrong as far as a swing over time day to day. I'm not trying to be perfect with that. I'm just trying to save my ass as a day trade, making sure I'm not getting in the trade at the top of the roller coaster as it's about to come screeching back down. All right, folks. So 12:01, a little bit after. I'm surprised I did not get a knock on my door just yet. We're going to wrap up. So, hey, if you're on social media, Facebook Live, LinkedIn, YouTube, a couple quick shout outs, might I say, to John and Jason at least. But hey, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me over a quick email. Josh@ctutrading.com is my personal email address. I'll actually post that there first. Any questions that you got from me, feel free to shoot me over a quick email. I got back to everybody at least over the last few days heading into the end of the last week was class week. So I had to catch up, and here we are now. We are good to go there. So keep the emails coming in. And then otherwise, though, if you're interested in joining us inside our live trading room, if you're fancy with your phone, scan that QR code just on the top left of your stream right there, just with that QR code, and get you access to a week-long trial inside our live trading room, get you access to our students like John, Kathleen, Grant, Leda, all of them right now chatting. And then otherwise myself, Rich, the instructors here, of course, the man himself, Fausto, 30-year pro, obviously, in the market. So, you have direct contact with us inside our live trading room. Just scan that QR code on the top left. If you have not subscribed to our social media streams just yet, you're popping your head in for the first time. Well, hey, as much as we want you inside our live trading room, hey, we understand if you're not ready to join us just yet, if you're a bit hesitant, just follow us on social media. Just be a friend, tell a friend at CyberTradingU on Twitter and YouTube, Cyber Trading University on Facebook, that is. And we look forward to seeing you here coming up. All right, so for all of us here collectively, Kathleen, Bell, Grant, Ravina, one more water here. Ooh, that last one, I was going a little long without the water there at the end. So we're going to wrap up here. So with that in mind, I will be back here later on this afternoon, 2:30 p.m. Eastern. So stay tuned as well on social media. I'll be back on for the afternoon meeting coming up. We'll rescan the market, see what's left to work with heading into the close. All right. Talk to everybody soon. Take care.